Hello and welcome. My name is Billy, and in this video, I'm going to be doing a wrap up of all the books I read in September. So I read 5 books in September, and the first book I read was Watership Down by Richard Adams. This is a children's classic, and on the surface, it's the story of these group of rabbits who go on this journey to find and establish a new home or warren. I really did enjoy it more than I thought I would. I don't typically read books where the main character is an animal, but this was a really good read. Even though it's described as a children's book, I felt like it was a little dark, but it felt more like an adult book that maybe kids could read. I don't know. That was just my impression. That was because there were moments when I was reading this where I had to put it down because I was like, it was like a little too much for me. But I think it's because I'm also a person who, it sounds bad, but it's harder for me to see animals suffering than it is for me to see people suffering. And I know that in the book, these rabbits are representing like human qualities, but it was still hard for me to see some of those experiences. The whole story starts with Fiver. Fiver is this rabbit who he gets these feelings, and he just has this feeling that something really, really bad is going to happen. And so he goes to the chief rabbit and tries to tell him, but of course, bureaucracy, and he kind of gets brushed off. But Fiver is like, look, me and my brother are leaving. If you want to come with us, then you can come. But something bad's going to happen. We should get out of here. And so that's how a group of them start to go. And it's like each chapter, it was just another challenge, another challenge, something else they have to overcome and deal with. But I will say, while it does have dark moments, it's honest, it's true, and I think he doesn't sugarcoat anything. And I think at the same time, it is hopeful because it shows that yes, sometimes things happen, life can be unfair, but it's in those moments that you kind of grow and you become a better version of yourself. And so I really, really enjoyed this book. After I read it, I feel like I had a greater appreciation for nature and just thinking about how, like, one little thing that we do can totally change the ecosystem of an entire animal community. And with that, afterwards, I read Tales from Watership Down, which is described as a sequel to Watership Down, but I think it's more just in the world of Watership Down, more so than a sequel. This book is divided into 3 parts. The first 2 parts are just stories that the rabbits tell about to each other. And then there's also a section where, so the rabbits, they have like their idol, Elahara, who is like this rabbit from long ago, and it's the reason why he's the reason why they are as fast as they are and as cunning and smart and as they are and resourceful. And so they, even throughout Watership Down, you kind of get these looks into stories about Elahara, and it's used as a way to motivate them to keep going and inspire them and getting ideas for how to overcome a challenge. And so you do get kind of these fables about El-Hara in the second book and his adventures, and that was really, really fun to read. And then the third part talks more about what happened at the end of the first book, like some of the things that happened to them. This book, more than the first, gives like children's book. It's very cute. It's very sweet. It's wholesome. I don't feel like it's as dark. I do think I enjoyed Watership Down better. I think I like that book more. But this Tales from Watership Down I thought was still a really cute book. It doesn't read like a novel. It reads more like short stories. I still think it's worth picking up. All right, the next book I read was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I did a reading vlog on this, so I won't go too much into the book, but this is dystopian fiction, and we're in this world where we have handmaids who go into homes and bear the children of the husbands and then give birth to them and then leave. And they kind of do this and go from house to house. And it's because for whatever reason, many women cannot bear their own children. But along with this book is looking at government control, government manipulation. It shows how religion, the Bible, is being used as this kind of shield for really messed up behavior. It shows human nature and how even those that are being oppressed, they can still have moments of being an oppressor or doing an action that you're like, why are you doing that? You should understand like how this person feels. I did enjoy the book. It's I still feel like the best word to describe it is disturbing. I did see an interview with Margaret Atwood talking about writing this book, and she said that she didn't put anything in the book that hasn't happened in human history. And so that makes it even more disturbing. I don't know if I would recommend it. I thought it was a great book. I love how she kind of revealed things as we went along, and she kind of showed us more of this world that of Warren is living in, who is the main character, who the story is being told from her perspective. And I really did enjoy that. I enjoyed how the story was crafted, but the story itself made me feel very uncomfortable. And maybe that is the entire point. This does end on a cliffhanger. There is a second book, Testaments. I have not read that yet. I will pick it up at some point when I'm in the mood to read it. But like I said, like the book just kind of made me uncomfortable. It's not a warm and fuzzy book, and it's so scary because you see how we could end up like that. You see how it's kind of like a slippery slope of giving over control to government, and you see how with fear people do very things they maybe wouldn't do if they didn't have that fear. We'll come back to Prince of the Skies. I talked about that in my vlog. I'll talk about that in a minute. But after that, I read God Help the Child by Toni Morrison. So what had happened was I went to return The Handmaid's Tale to the library, and I was planning on continuing with Prince of the Skies. Then, of course, when I go to the library, I have to walk around. And when I walk around, what do I see? I see God Help the Child by Toni Morrison. And I start to read it, and it catches my attention. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I'll get this. I'll read this at some point. I read a little bit and I put it down. I try to read a little bit more of Prince of the Skies, but I can't stop thinking about this book. And so this is the next book that I read. This follows Lula Ann. She also goes by Bride, and Lula Ann is described as blue-black. She's a dark-skinned Black girl. And from the very beginning of her life, she is made to feel like she is not beautiful. Like both of her parents are light-skinned, and when she's born, her father thinks, "You're not my child," and he leaves the mother. That's how bad it is. And then it's so bad that the mother is so ashamed of her that she doesn't even call her mom mom. She calls her Sweetness. She tells her to call her Sweetness. This book, it looks at how trauma from your childhood can go with you into adulthood, and even when you feel like you've dealt with it, it can come up in when you don't even expect it. Lula Ann, because of her feeling like she's like craving that love from her mother, so much so that she like does something really, really bad. Even when she is getting like a negative touch or negative reaction, she still is happy because it's something, it's something from her mother, some type of attention. You can kind of see this into her adulthood and the things that she is kind of willing to accept. And so she is kind of forced to face herself when one, this teacher from her childhood gets out of prison, and two, she has a breakup with her boyfriend, Booker. It's these two things that kind of lead to a breaking point in her, and she has no choice. She has no choice but to face these things that she is dealing with. I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it was so good. This is my second Toni Morrison. The first one I read was Love. I will say I felt like I understood this a bit more than Love, but I do think like all Toni Morrison books, they just require you to read them more than once. Even like the title, God Help the Child. This could be referring to Bride. It could be referring to the different cases that we see mentioned in the book of like children and sexual assault. It could refer to Booker. It could refer to the last sentence of the book. It could refer to healing the inner child within all of us. You know, it's so much meaning in this. I will say that unlike in Love, I felt like every character was really fleshed out and you could pick them out and write a story about any one of them. That's how I felt about Love. In this one, I felt like a lot of characters had that quality. One that I kind of didn't feel that way about was Brooklyn. Brooklyn is Bride's best friend in the book, or seemingly best friend. I wasn't getting best friend vibe from her. I was getting a wolf in sheep's clothing from her, but that was my impression. But I don't know. I was trying to that's why I feel like maybe it requires a reread, because I wanted to know like, well, what was the significance of this character? Like, she felt like she was just there. She's just there to showcase Bride's lack of self-love, to accept this as a friend. I don't know. Another thing, that reason I think this requires a reread, or for me, like, I just want to have a deeper understanding. There is a period where a Bride has to have plastic surgery, and after the surgery, she notices that, oh, my ears aren't pierced anymore. Oh, it's probably because of the surgery. And then she notices, wow, I'm starting to lose weight. This doesn't fit like it used to. And then one day she wakes up and she's like, oh my gosh, my boobs are gone. It's like, but nobody around her is like recognizing these differences, except one person does kind of recognize. And then, so I'm thinking like, well, what's the significance of that person recognizing? And then what does this all signify? And then there's a portion where she finally starts to face all the things she's been running from, and suddenly like her ears are pierced again, and her weight's okay, and her boobs are back, and it's just like, that's the type of thing where I want to, the reason why I would like to reread this again. Oh, another thing that the title could refer to is, even with the mom, Sweetness, healing the child within her, because she refers to herself, she's like, well, I have good hair, and she feels justified in her treatment of Bride. She thinks that Bride is as well off today because of how I treated her, and I prepared her for the world that she was going to go live into. I feel like even the mother has inner healing to do. You hate an aspect of yourself, you hate an aspect of your blackness, where you feel like, oh, thank goodness I'm light skinned. Thank goodness I have good hair. This book definitely touches on colorism. Like, there's just so many. Like, this is the book I wish I read, like Buddy read with someone else, so I could talk to them about it. And then after I read that, I read Nicholas Sparks' A Walk to Remember, which is the total, I feel like, total opposite of Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison books require you to like pay attention, to think, to see what you're, to really focus on what you're reading. Nicholas Sparks is just kind of my, like, I don't have to think too much. The story is like, the people are gonna fall in love really quickly. It's not gonna be completely realistic, but the story is gonna grab you, and it's just gonna be like, aw, at the end. So in this, we follow Jamie and Landon. They are 17 years old. They're opposites. Landon is kind of a rebel, and Jamie is the preacher's daughter, and she's like a saint. And through close proximity, they fall in love, and that is the story that we are following. So I'm not a big romance person, but even though I keep eating up these Nicholas Sparks books, but I'm not a big romance person. But this one, the romance happens closer to the end, and it feels more like a coming of age story. It feels more like a redemption story for Landon, and we're seeing him become a better person and grow into a man, from a boy to a man, and take responsibility. I think that's why I enjoyed this so much, because it wasn't too much romance, honestly. And this was made into a movie, and I couldn't help but compare it to the movie, because it was like, this movie was a big part of my adolescence. I've watched it so many times with Shane West and Mandy Moore. This is one where I feel like the movie and the book are kind of, I can't choose which one I like more. They are different. The essence of the story is the same, but they're different in that This book, it takes place in the 1950s, and the movie, it takes place in like the 2000s, early 2000s. And so there's just a difference in culture in those times, where in the book, I feel like manners are different. And so I feel like it just creates a different dynamic. There is also the added piece of Landon and Jamie's families have kind of a history where they don't really get along, and you don't have that in the movie. And I think that makes them getting together in this even a bigger deal because of their families not getting along. The book definitely comes off as more like heartfelt. I'm not gonna lie, I was crying at the end of this. I definitely was crying at the end of this. Where in the movie, I don't feel like I cried in the movie. Lastly, with this book title, I feel like the meaning of the title comes off a little bit more in the book than it does in the movie. In the movie, I kind of thought it was referencing, if you've seen the movie, when Landon first goes to Jamie's house and she is coming out. She is a scene where she is like walking out of the door. And in the movie, he says, like, I always think of her like as she's walking towards me. And so, like, that's where you think, like, A Walk to Remember. But in this, A Walk to Remember is a completely different reference. This is a sweet book. Again, looking forward to reading more Nicholas Sparks books. Okay, now for my elephants in the room. The Prince of the Skies. In my vlog, I said I was going to continue reading this. I got about 206 pages in. I'm on chapter 35. And this book is about the life, the pilot career of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who is the author of The Little Prince. He's also called Saint X in this. I'm going to call him that because I don't feel like I pronounce his name right. It's looking at his life as a pilot in the early days of commercial aviation, and also two of his friends as well. And each chapter is told from, this book is in third person, but each chapter kind of focuses on one of the characters, and it also might be taking place in a different year. So not only are you changing characters, but you're changing years. And that kind of started to bother me. I don't know why. I feel like this God Help the Child has like each chapter focusing on a different character, but because it's more linear and like chronological in the events that are happening, it's easier for me to digest. But this would be like, it's not even connected like in what the different characters are experiencing. It's just like these silos of their experiences, and then you have moments where they kind of cross paths. And I don't know, I just didn't really like that much. I was really enjoying like the descriptions of like flying and things like that, but like I said, this is going into like the early days in developing kind of commercial aviation. So you're seeing them as they are developing like flight routes and all of that, and that isn't really a huge interest of mine. So it's kind of like I'm not giving up on the book. I'm just not sure if this is the book for me. I don't know if I'm the right audience for this, but I think if you're a fan of the author of The Little Prince, Saint X, and if you are a fan of like aviation and the history of like establishing commercial aviation, I think you really like this book. But what I want to know from you is, if you have read this book, is it worth me continuing? I was almost 50% of the way through, but I was just like, I'm really just not liking this. I think also with the different points of views, I probably found Saint X's point of view the least interesting. I was more interested in his friend Jean Momo, who is more of like a ladies' man. He's a go kind of person. Like, his story seemed more interesting to me than Saint X's, who is kind of like pining over this girl, and he's, his head's more in the clouds, and that's how it shows how he comes up with some of the characters in his stories. And that's cool and all, but I'm like, I just didn't find it as interesting. Should I continue with this? Let me know. And then lastly, I did start a book. I did not finish it, and that was As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. I got this from the library, and I feel like this is a book that I need to have my own copy of. This is about a woman who dies, and you see her family and friends, her neighbors, it's like their experience, you're looking at their experience with her death. And it's like you know how you can, if there's a group of people and they see something or they experience something, and everybody has a different, they all experience the same thing, but they might have a different experience. And so you're seeing that in this book. I was really, really enjoying it. One example, what is, this starts before she actually dies. You know she dies because it says that on the back. I'm not giving anything away in that regard. But she has a few children, and then one chapter might be from one person's perspective, and they'll say like, oh, Jewel didn't really care that his mother was dying. He cared about more about making money. And then you'll get a chapter from Jewel, and he's like, why are they trying to rush her to die? Why are they building her coffin? She's not even dead yet. Like, you can see he actually really does care. And you might have one moment happen, and there's so many different interpretations of that moment. I just feel like this is a book where I need to be able to like tab things and mark things. Just want to get my own copies. I plan on doing that, but this is one I didn't finish this month. Those are all the books I read in the month of September. I would love to chat with you, especially if you've read God Help the Child. I would love to talk about this book. And yeah, if I had to pick a favorite this month, it would be probably between Watership Down and God Help the Child. And if I had to pick a least favorite, it definitely would be, even though I haven't finished it, it would definitely be The Prince of the Skies. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.